Hi there. I hope you had a good weekend. I did. Feeling good. It's Monday. It's March. It's Women's History Month. Let's do this. Stand up. Yeah, we are off, and I am happy to be with you here in March. Thank you very much for pressing play on today's show, for subscribing to the show with a paid subscription if you have. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. I am very grateful to all of you. I will see all paid subscribers that want to come at tonight's hangout at 8 p.m. Also, it was a crazy weekend in news, of course. You had the Friday disaster in the Oval Office that will never be forgotten by this generation of Americans. The United States government is now aligning with Russia. That's according to Russia, by the way. And J.D. Vance had a really poor welcome to Vermont, as he should. Congratulations to all you Vermonters who stood along the streets cursing him out, basically, as he took his family skiing. And, of course, there were the Academy Awards last night. Did you watch? I just have to say, Conan O'Brien is a comedy god, and Shane Gillis hosted Saturday Night Live. Not as much a comedy god. I rarely disparage any comedians, but man, that monologue was cringe. Don't watch it. All right, well, I've got your headlines, I've got your clips, and a great conversation with Jeff Jarvis coming up at 31 minutes. So let's do it, shall we? Also, I hope you heard the conversation with Christian Finnegan that I taped on Friday, posted Friday night, and thanks to those of you who reached out. People always love when Christian's on. He's going to be joining us in PODJAM, at PODJAM. I hope that you will. March 28th, out in Vegas. It's going to be a 3-day affair, and we are going to have an awesome time. If you haven't got tickets, there's still time, and we would love to see you there. So if you're on the fence, please come. It's going to be awesome. And now it's time for today's headlines. Let's see what I've gathered for you from the weekend in headlines. Of course, the top headline over the weekend, I think, that drove the weekend in news was the disaster in the Oval Office. And it was widely criticized across the political spectrum, except by Republicans. You know, I think the MAGA loved it. Of course, MAGA loves that kind of terrible, awful treatment of anybody, and anything that's disgraceful and embarrassing, they love, and the rest of us cringe and feel horrified by, and the rest of the world certainly seemed to be horrified by it as well. Other world leaders, European leaders especially, welcoming Zelensky into their countries over the weekend. More about that, but that really was the big headline. I've got a lot of audio for you, response and reactions to it. Like I said, hundreds of protesters lined the streets of small towns in Vermont this weekend when J.D. Vance arrived at Sugarbush Ski Resort following his cowardly attack on a wartime president, Ukrainian President Zelensky, on Friday. Vance and his family arrived in Warren, Vermont as part of a skiing trip, and they were welcomed by what even Fox News described as a mile-long line of protesters. Footage captured on the ground shows hundreds lining the streets of the town with signs labeling the vice president as Nazi scum and another sign saying, "Go ski in Russia." And I loved every second of it. Congratulations to everybody in Vermont for that performance. That was important, and I hope that he saw it all, and I'm glad I wasn't there that day skiing. All right, well, I thought this was an interesting headline. An oil giant company in Norway has announced a ban on fuel sales to all U.S. forces following Trump's treatment of Ukrainian president. So there's actually consequences of that behavior. How about that? He's actually affected the United States Navy. Norwegian firm called Haltbach Bunkers, I don't know how it's pronounced, announced it's going to stop providing fuel to all American forces in Norway as it declared no fuel to Americans. The firm posted on social media to declare its support for Zelensky as it dealt a hammer blow to U.S. President Trump following the heated spat televised from the Oval Office, is how it was written up in a European outlet. Yeah, real consequences. The Attorney General of the United States is named Pam Bondi. She's a sycophant of Donald Trump's, and she's getting crushed by even MAGA supporters after the what's being called Epstein Files debacle. She tried to blame FBI Director Kash Patel, sending him a letter that said, "I requested the full and complete files related to Jeffrey Epstein. In response to the request, I received approximately 200 pages of documents, which consisted primarily of flight logs, a list of Epstein's contacts, and a list of victims' names. I'm directing you to conduct an immediate investigation to why my order to the FBI was not followed." She then demanded the full file by 8 a.m. Saturday morning, but no updates from the Attorney General as of yet. It's an interesting story to watch because everybody's wondering if Trump's name is going to be all over them. And if so, how are they going to hide it? Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered about 3,000 active duty troops to go waste their time on the southern U.S. border, including soldiers from a motorized brigade equipped with a 20-ton armored Stryker combat vehicles, which carried like 11 soldiers at once, apparently. It's not immediately clear where in Arizona they're going to be staying, but it is clear that they will sit there and mostly do nothing to waste their time and money to make Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump look tough. And they won't. All right. Well, how about this story? ProPublica got the big blockbuster story. They're reporting that the Speaker of the House, Christian nationalist Mike Johnson, has been living in the $3.7 million DC home of an evangelical pastor named Steve Berger. Now, this guy is a real piece of work. He's attacked the separation of church and state as a, quote, delusional lie. He said it's his mission to minister to members of Congress so that what they learn is then translated into policy. Now, Mike Johnson has been apparently living there since January. Berger also, this millionaire, opposes homosexuality, watching pornography, and same-sex marriage. And he says all that opens the door to all manner of sexual depravity and wickedness. That's the guy that Mike Johnson is living in his house now. Will he be asked about that by reporters? I sure hope so. The San Francisco Chronicle is reporting that the International Pride Orchestra is saying that it was disinvited from presenting a summer Pride celebration concert at the Kennedy Center the same day Trump fired the board and took it over. Trump posted that day on Truth Social, no more drag shows or other anti-American propaganda. And so you're seeing a movement to overturn gay marriage in the courts from a number of states. And you're also seeing this kind of movement to erase anything that is gay, any kind of performance or pride celebration in this case. And we're going to see more of this, obviously. So let's not act like it's not an anti-gay movement. MAGA and Trump isn't anti-gay. The orchestra director said, "We are heartbroken when we learned that our concert would no longer be welcome at the Kennedy Center." The orchestra conductor said, "Sadly, this is not surprising, but it is itself profoundly un-American and therefore disheartening. His actions further embolden us in our purpose." So those are the statements coming out from the Pride Orchestra, International Pride Orchestra, that is no longer invited to perform at the Kennedy Center. The measles outbreak in Texas continues to grow. Yep, that's right. Measles are back, and they're growing there in Texas almost entirely from unvaccinated families and unvaccinated kids. Nearly 150 cases now reported. Many more will be exposed for sure because it takes like 2 weeks to track it. Also, now let's head over to South Carolina. Across the country, firefighters are battling 170 blazes in North and South Carolina throughout the weekend, including apparently an enormous fire near Myrtle Beach that doubled in size overnight on Saturday. The blaze near Carolina Forest community just west of the tourist spot in Horry County stretched across 1,200 acres as of Sunday afternoon. It was 0% contained, according to the South Carolina Forestry Commission. Now, South Carolina is a red state. Are they going to get federal aid? We'll watch and see. Also read the story over the weekend about a lunar lander, robotic lunar lander built by a Texas-based company called Firefly, successfully landed on the moon, touching down around 2:34 a.m. Central Time on Sunday. Yesterday, the lander, called Blue Ghost, launched to orbit on a SpaceX rocket in January, spent some time in Earth's orbit, and had been maneuvering toward the moon ever since. Firefly has become the second private sector company to ever achieve a soft lunar landing. And its mission, it's carrying out its mission, is as a contractor under NASA's CLPS and Artemis programs, aims to use robotic landers to scout the moon before humans return there later this decade. We're probably not going back, though, are we? Do you think? Anyway, that was an interesting story to read. And finally, we lost a legend over the weekend. I learned about Hazel Dukes, who was the president of New York State chapter of the NAACP, a lifelong civil rights advocate. She died Saturday, age of 92. She was still working. She led the New York City NAACP for nearly 5 decades, fought tirelessly for voting rights, economic development, fair housing, education through her career. Even in her 90s, she spoke out against police brutality and for adequate health care in underserved communities. The NAACP's New York chapter said in a statement. Hazel Dukes was 92 and a legend in civil rights. All right, those are the headlines that I gathered for you. I hope you like them. If I missed anything, you should let me know. And always happy to hear your ideas for news, undercovered news, or anything else that's being reported locally. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. All right, now it's time for the clips that I've chosen for you. A lot of them have to do with reactions to the disaster and embarrassment in the Oval Office on Friday. And we got to start with Friday afternoon. The former ambassador to Russia, Mike McFaul, was on MSNBC. Here was what he had to say.
This does nobody any good. This doesn't make the American people better off tomorrow. The senator, now Vice President Vance, pleading for the leader of a country to pledge his fealty to President Trump and say thank you. I want to remind your viewers, President Zelensky said thank you to the American people 1,000 times. Use ChatGPT, Mr. Vice President, and look for it. And by the way, Senator Vance voted against that aid to Ukraine. So the paradox of that, it just was shocking to me. And they need to sign this deal. This deal was good for the United States, was good for Ukraine. And instead of signing that deal, we were relitigating Biden and Obama. And I just wish the president would put our interests today front and center and stop litigating what happened in 2016 or before, because that is not in America's national interest.
All right, there's Mike McFall. Let's head over to Connecticut, or Meet the Press, where the senator from Connecticut, Chris Murphy, had this to say.
What's your reaction to what you just heard from the president's national security advisor? Do you think there's hope of salvaging this relationship with Ukraine?
So it is absolutely shameful what is happening right now. The White House has become an arm of the Kremlin. Every single day you hear from the national security advisor, from the president of the United States, from his entire national security team, Kremlin talking points. For the last week, the White House has been pretending as if Ukraine started this war. That's essentially saying that Poland invaded Germany at the beginning of World War II. There are still facts in this world. And the fact is this: Vladimir Putin is a brutal dictator. Russia started this war. And the entire pretext for that meeting yesterday was an attempt to rewrite history in order to sign a deal with Putin that hands Putin Ukraine. That is disastrous for U.S. national security. That means that China will be on the march. Putin may not stop.
All right, I got to cut him off there just to go. I've got so many more. Here is Senator Robert Garcia of California on MSNBC over the weekend.
A very shameful display for all that to happen in the Oval Office, in front of the world and all of our allies who we need to stop Russia. And I think what honestly is most disgraceful is that throughout that conversation, that the president could not be clear that Putin is a danger to Europe, to Ukraine, and to the United States. Putin is an authoritarian dictator, and we need to call it like it is. And to embarrass Zelensky, who is taking Putin on right now, to belittle him, an ally, and our efforts in Ukraine,
let me just
I think it's a mistake.
All right. He was on Fox News. That's why I got interrupted there, by the way. Here is Paul Rieckhoff on CNN, former executive president, CEO, founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America.
It wasn't just a mistake. It was an ambush. I mean, this was a plan. This was a politically calculated ambush from all sides, right? No one would feel comfortable walking into an environment like that from any country, and no one should be treated that way. From the reporter to the greeting to the mocking of his clothes, it was beneath America and beneath the White House to treat a guest in our country and a leader who is actively engaged in combat, who is right now losing his fellow service members. He's losing his women and children. His cities are being bombed. And we're talking about his clothes, and we're talking to him that way. It was victim shaming, which is what Trump has been doing to Zelensky in Ukraine since before he got elected. It's unacceptable, it's inappropriate, and it's also undermining not just Ukraine, but our own national security. We are now aligned with the bad guys. Russia is the bad guy. Ukraine is the good guy. And when we continue to attack Ukraine and defend Russia, that puts us in line with the bad guys, which is not where America wants to be.
All right. Good job, Paul. And also Keith Boykin on the same show on CNN on Friday night.
Oh, and J.D. Vance doesn't even know enough about the topic to be having the discussion. When Zelensky asked him, "Have you ever been to Ukraine?" he said, "No, I've seen it on TV." Are you kidding me? I've seen it on TV is your excuse for being able to lecture the president of Ukraine in the middle of a war, as opposed to having some actual knowledge when he's telling you about Russia. And everyone knows about Russia's history except apparently J.D. Vance.
There you go. I thought that was good. I thought this was great from the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It's Keir Starmer who welcomed Vladimir Zelensky into 10 Downing Street shortly after he was kicked out of the Oval Office by our embarrassing criminal president who supports Russia. Well, Keir Starmer and nobody in Europe does.
Well, let me just say that you're very, very welcome here in Downing Street. And as you heard from the cheers on the street outside, you have full backing across the United Kingdom And we stand with you, with Ukraine, for as long as it may take. And I hope you heard some of that cheering in the street. That is the people of the United Kingdom coming out to demonstrate how much they support you, how much they support Ukraine, and our absolute determination to stand with you, unwavering determination, and to achieve what we both want to achieve, which is a lasting peace for Ukraine based on sovereignty.
Yeah, there you go. There is the leader of UK. Now here's the leader of Canada, and somebody put music behind it, and I apologize, but I guess it works. Here's Justin Trudeau.
Mes chers amis, good morning, everyone. Thank you to my fellow leaders for your timely and salient remarks. And above all, thank you, Volodymyr, for hosting today's summit and for your courageous leadership as the duly elected democratic leader of this great nation. Since the start of Russia's full-scale illegal war of aggression 3 years ago, you've shown remarkable personal bravery, resilience, and resolve, a defiant spirit mirrored by the unbreakable Ukrainian people. You continue to inspire me and tens of millions of my fellow citizens back home in Canada. But let us be frank. You and the Ukrainian people should never have had to endure even a single day of this unjustified, brutal war, let alone 1,096 of them, or more accurately, over 4,000 of them since Russia illegally seized.
All right, there you go. I thought that was important. Also, here is the Secretary of State now, Marco Rubio, of course, is a Cuban-American. That means he's always been against communism and Russia. Specifically, he's been a Russia hawk his entire time in the Senate. But now he basically works with and agrees with Russia and is doing the Kremlin's handiwork for him, which is just an astonishing development. He was there on the couch in the Oval Office. Everybody made fun of him, including me. He was just there shrinking into the couch so much, in fact, that people were worried that J.D. Vance was going to fuck him. Because he's in the couch. Sorry. That was a John Fugelsang joke or something like that. Anyway, here he is on CNN making a fool of himself.
Vice President Vance was criticizing Zelensky for not saying thank you specifically during that meeting, those 40 to 50 minutes that we were in the Oval Office. But certainly, you know very well, Secretary Rubio, your time as a senator here in Washington, that whenever Zelensky has come to Washington before, he has very much expressed that kind of gratitude. Just listen to this.
Thank you for both financial packages you have already provided us. Really, all my appreciations from my heart, from the hearts of Ukrainians, all Ukrainians. So what can I say to American people in English? My English is poor. To say all my messages and all my thanks to you. And thank you very much for supporting us, our people.
Thank you, United States. Thank you, America.
Ukraine is grateful to the United States for its overwhelming support.
Do you think you can make the argument that he hasn't said thank you?
Well, I think the vice president said he hadn't said it today. He hadn't heard it today in that meeting. And we were hoping that meeting would begin by thank you for everything you've done for us. We wouldn't be where we are today without you. We wouldn't even have a chance to negotiate a peace without the help you gave us. By the way, without the help you gave us when you were president in the first term, because President Obama refused to provide them defensive capabilities in terms of.
All right, in terms of weapons, they're talking about the Javelin weapons. It's a lot to unpack there, but there's more.
You yourself have said previously that Putin cannot be trusted in negotiations. That was the point that President Zelensky was ultimately making during that conversation, is that there cannot be an agreement without security guarantees, because he was talking about all the ceasefire agreements before, or agreements that Putin has just blown past. I mean, do you still feel that way, that Putin cannot be trusted in these negotiations?
Well, I was there yesterday when the president said in front of the media that our approach is going to be trust but verify. President Trump's made deals his entire life. He's not going to get suckered into some deal that's not a real deal. We all understand this. We understand it on our end for certain.
Okay. Wow. Has he sunk very, very low? That is crazy. He will not last. He will get burnt. He has gotten too close to the sun, the orange bad man, and you're going to see. I'm sure he'll be one of the first to go. Okay. Will he regret it? Doubtful. What a disgrace. Okay, now let's go over to, I thought this was interesting, Meet the Press Senator James Lankford. He is a Republican senator, and he's one of the few of those that has been outspoken against Russia and for Zelensky, but still he hedges because he's a coward.
You have been a longtime supporter of defending Ukraine. In fact, back in 2022, you co-sponsored legislation that called for the U.S. to protect Ukraine, quote, before, during, and after the invasion. Based on what you witnessed in the Oval Office, Senator, are you concerned that the United States is turning its back on Ukraine?
No, we're not turning our back on Ukraine, nor should we. Putin is a murderous KGB thug that murders his political enemies and is a dictator there. And so we've seen that. We've seen his aggression. Countries around him have seen that. Obviously, the Ukrainian people have seen that. The challenge is now we're at a stalemate. This is a World War I-like trench warfare, and it is best to be able to get to at least a pause. And what I hear President Trump saying over and over again is we need to get to a stop in fighting, find some resolution. I understand Zelensky is rightfully concerned that Putin has violated every single agreement he's ever signed and that he can't be trusted. He's looking for some kind of security guarantees, which the French and the UK are saying they want to put troops in. But we need to get these two folks at the table, get to some kind of resolution to something that may look like North and South Korea for a long time and have a line where people are looking at each other, but not an active war.
As you know, extraordinarily, the Kremlin is cheering what it saw in the Oval Office. Let me ask you about something I just discussed with Speaker Johnson, which is that Senator Lindsey Graham has said that President Zelensky may need to resign in order for this peace process to move forward. What say you, Senator? Do you think President Zelensky might need to resign?
I don't agree. I'm not interested in calling on the resignation of other world leaders. I didn't like it when Chuck Schumer asked for Netanyahu to be removed. I don't like it when other members of the Senate asked for Zelensky to be removed either. Quite frankly, I think that would spiral Ukraine into chaos right now, trying to find who is the negotiator to bring an issue to peace. If you remember in that press conference in the Oval Office just on Friday, it began with President Trump saying that he is a friend of Zelensky. He is interested. They've had good conversations. I think they understand each other, and that obviously there are differences where Zelensky wants more in the way of some kind of security guarantees. The United States is not willing to be able to put troops on the ground. We're not willing to do that, but President Trump obviously met with Zelensky first. Everybody was talking about Trump is going to work with Putin. He had foreign ministers working with the Russians. He wanted to meet personally with Zelensky first. I think that's a very clear sign of where he is and where he stands on this. But he wants to get both sides of the table and get an end to the fighting and the death.
A lot of people are curious, Senator, about the bigger implications of this moment. Are you concerned that what happened in the Oval Office, the fact that the United States sided with Russia and North Korea in that UN vote, for example, the fact that President Trump accused Zelensky of starting this war, could that be sending a signal to China that it has a green light to invade Taiwan?
No, it sure should not send that. If China somehow receives that, they're receiving the exact wrong message, that the United States stands with our ally Taiwan, and we, like the rest of the world, want to see peace in that region and to continue to be able to have relationships all across that region. But China should not misread this at all. What President Trump is trying to do is trying to get both sides to the table. This is the interesting challenge that has not been done through this entire war in the last 3 years, to be able to get both sides and then to be able to figure out how to be able to get a stop to the fighting and then to be able to keep the fighting stopped. That's the next part. That's the biggest next challenge.
All right. Yeah, we'll see about that for sure. Now let's head over to ABC News this week, where George Stephanopoulos, who bent the knee, ABC did, was interviewing, interestingly enough, someone who hasn't, or her company hasn't, the Associated Press. This is Julie Pace.
There's so much going on here. It's hard to keep up with all of it. One of the things I want to ask you about, Julie, you're the executive editor of the Associated Press. The Associated Press has now been blocked from covering the White House because you refused to call the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America. Where do things stand right now? How has it affected your coverage?
Sure. Thank you for asking. So I think the first thing I would say is the Associated Press is 179 years old. We're a global, independent, nonpartisan news organization that's had a commitment to covering the White House since our founding. And, really, you mentioned this is about Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico, yes, it's about that, but it's also about something so much bigger. This is about freedom of speech, and that is a principle, a right that Americans across the political spectrum believe in deeply. This is about whether the government can control the language that we use, that ordinary people can use, and it's about whether the government can retaliate against you if you don't use the language that they prefer. So we are standing up for that right, not just for the AP, but for all independent news organizations and for the public, because we believe, again, that this is a principle, freedom of speech, that all Americans, regardless of their political party, should believe in.
Any sense of how it's going to end?
We certainly hope that it results in us being allowed back in to cover White House events, because we're there to be the eyes and ears for Americans and people around the world.
All right, Julie Pace and the Associated Press, I guess a pretty good organization to still throw your support to. And here's my friend Ayman Mohyeldin on MSNBC, ending his show talking about what's coming up next. He was not, as a lot of reports said, let go by MSNBC. And so I thought you guys might find this interesting, too.
Before I sign off tonight, I want to address some personal news about my future at this network. This week, MSNBC made some changes to its lineup of programming, and while I am saddened to see the departure of my dear friend, ally, and colleague, the fearless Joy Reid, I am still encouraged by the network's steadfast commitment to fearless journalism and, more importantly, my place and my voice in that commitment. This week, several headlines claimed that my show, this show, Ayman, had been canceled and that I was leaving the network, and that incorrect news created a wave of commentary and criticism about which voices can be heard and which cannot on mainstream cable news, especially when it comes to coverage of the Middle East. And it is important for me that I set that record straight. I'm not leaving the network. In fact, quite the opposite. Despite the challenging and fearless ways we have covered stories on this show for more than 2 years, MSNBC has offered to extend my tenure at the company. It has also offered me to launch a new show that gives my voice and others more expanded hours of coverage on Saturday and Sunday. Soon, this show, the name, the format will change, and I will be joined by 2 new incredible hosts who will be announced soon enough. But one thing that won't change is my promise to you, the viewers, that I won't stop talking about the difficult stories and challenging topics that others don't cover. One other thing that won't change is the commitment of the incredibly talented and dedicated team of producers who work on this show fearlessly and selflessly. Without them, I would not be able to do what I do on this show, and one that we do all together.
Seriously. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please sit down. Seriously, sit down. You never stood. Okay, all right. Hi, Demi. How are you? That was weird. Yeah, awkward. I'm missing some car keys. Anyway, this is very exciting. Hello, I'm your host, Conan O'Brien. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I know what you're thinking. Did Conan not have work done? Seriously. He looks his age. I should have done something. I am excited to be here. Welcome to the 97th Academy Awards. It's Hollywood's biggest night that starts at 4 in the afternoon. Everyone here just had brunch. I don't understand it. But it's the Oscars, and I say, let's do this thing. You ready to go? I am. I'm walking to show I have control of the stage. A complete unknown. A real pain. Nosferatu. These are just some of the names I was called on the red carpet. I think 2 were fair. We're here to celebrate the movie industry. What a year for the movie industry. Netflix leads all studios with an impressive 18, count them, 18 price increases. Yes.
Good stuff. He was great last night, I thought. And now, real quick, SNL Weekend Update. Colin Jost, Michael Che.
President Trump met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday. Let's see how it went.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Pretty good. And now now, thanks to that meeting, now you actually can gamble on World War III on FanDuel.
President Trump pardoned Oath Keepers leader Stuart Rhodes, who was serving 18 years for his role in the January 6th attacks. And ladies, just like his eyes, he's single. President Trump defending his pardon of the January 6th attackers, saying that these are just people that love their country. You know, like how OJ loved Nicole. It's a dark update.
Trump repeatedly scolded Zelensky, telling him, you have real problems. Yeah, man, he's in a war. No one's asking to borrow missiles so they can take the party to the next level. Zelensky was asked to leave the White House. Then he appeared on Fox News and said he thinks he can still salvage his relationship with President Trump, which is like Justin Baldoni saying, I'd love to work with Blake again.
Agreement in the defamation lawsuit against Rudy Giuliani has been reached, which allows him to keep his Florida condo, Yankees memorabilia, and his most prized possession, Secretariat's teeth.
Secretariat's teeth. You got to love Michael Che on Weekend Update. And Colin Jost, of course. All right. Well, those are your clips. Those are your headlines. And it is a lot of work. And it's all free. But it isn't cheap. So please sign up for a subscription. You can pay more. A lot of people signing up. I'm very happy to have new subscribers and folks who have upgraded their subscription to pay more. It is very, very appreciated. I am so thankful and hope to see you. And thank you tonight at 8 p.m. at our Hangout. All right. Now it's time to get to my guest. He's one of our favorites, and we love him. Jeff Jarvis joins me. He's an author. He's a journalism professor. He's a television critic. He's a former magazine editor. You should check out his blog, Buzz Machine. Check out his new books. He's got 2 of them out now and so much more. I don't know what else I could say about Jeff. He's one of the best people to talk to about politics, specifically about media and journalism. I always love talking to him. I always love when he joins me. Today was no exception. Let's kick it off right now with the great Professor Jeff Jarvis. There he is, and we saw him on CNN. We were all so excited. Me and all of your fans were so excited to see you on TV taking on Scott Jennings. How did you? Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you. The general response, the funny thing was there's one guy from Newsmax who watches CNN. He's been outed because he has all those reply guys come along and say nasty things on Twitter, but I don't really go to Twitter much anymore, so that's fine. And then the response on Blue Sky, the nicer place, is, oh, how can you be in the same room with Scott Jennings without decking him? He's just so awful.
Yeah, the last on, I think one of those guys clipped it up and made me look like a whiny little, you know what. And to be fair, I was.
Of course, yes.
But like they memed it, and I got it went on for at least a week. I'm only on Twitter though, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you get the jerks on email that come to you, and they have no life. They have no life. But it is interesting to see the difference between Twitter, I won't call it X, and Blue Sky remains the nicer place. And because blocking works on Blue Sky, it's better. I can get rid of the few reply guys who come in.
Since you brought it up, say a little more about Blue Sky.
I like Blue Sky. I'm happy with it. People I care about are there. It's not the same as Twitter was, but that's okay. And it's going to be federated and going to be open, and it's built on a protocol, not on a platform. So as long as they make good on those promises, it's worth supporting. Mastodon is similarly open and federated and can't be bought by a nihilistic nihilist like Musk. And so that was redundant, wasn't it? A nihilistic nihilist. And narcissist. I meant to say he was a narcissist.
I like nihilist. Whatever you said, it sounds like the album. Yeah.
Yeah.
At least.
So I like Blue Sky. I'm a supporter of Blue Sky. I think it's good.
Okay. Let's tell you brought up Elon Musk. I think he's been the wild card. We knew that we didn't know what would happen if Trump got elected. He came in towards the end of the campaign. He was supporting Vivek and others, I think. Before Trump, he helped influence the pick of J.D. Vance, and now he and his tech bros, which I've been learning so much about. So some great reporters that have been covering those tech billionaires for a long time. And now they're in charge. He's in charge. And I don't think we thought we would see this. This seems shocking. So just start with his role and Doge in general. And we got to get to the public reaction of it, because that's the most interesting and important thing in a way.
It is. But I think I've heard, as you have, a lot of people predicting that Trump will get tired of Musk having all the spotlight and this bromance can't live. I don't believe that. I think that Musk is doing exactly what Trump wants. He is the key to money. Trump loves money. He gave a hell of a lot of money to the campaign. He's the key to Thiel and Peter Thiel and all that money in South Africa. And so he's not just doing Trump's bidding, he's going beyond what Trump would know to do. And Trump is delighted with it and happy at the reaction and happy everybody's pissed off and happy that Congress people are in a squeeze. So I don't think Musk is going anywhere. And I think that he is purposely, what they want to do on the right is ruin government. And he's doing a hell of a job of ruining government. So they're happy with him. He's doing what they want. And yeah, people might scream and yell a little bit at town halls, but they're not going to have any more town halls and they won't hear it.
So that's the public reaction we've seen so far. It depends on where you get your news with how you interpret it. It also depends, I think, on your ideology, because those on the right who have always hated government and seen it as the problem, not the solution, I think, as Reagan called it, and blame minorities and poor people and all that generations long now ideology about conservatives' feelings towards government, they're happy with it. But those of us who live on Earth One, who realize those are real people with real jobs doing important things. Last night at our hangout, we had some software system engineers explaining to us that once you turn a thing on or off over here, you got to cross-check it over there before you go live. Like, they can't undo a lot of this, and we're potentially going to see some real chaos as a result of the unorganized way that they are just flipping switches is the best way I can try to paraphrase what they said. So it's hard to know which reaction will win. Who do you think is going to have the most impact? What's going to have the most impact?
If things break, they're happy with it. They're fine with it. It doesn't matter. They're breaking everything. They want to break all of what is in government. And the problem is that last time I was on, I went ballistic screaming about the media, and I'll try to stop myself, restrain myself this time. But the media is screwing this up miserably. They keep on talking about a war on bureaucracy. No, it's not about, you're playing into their game when you use that word. Words matter. And this morning, the Times, or as I like to say, the Broken Times, had a big feature about Musk and how he's done it. And it's not just approving, it's practically admiring of it. So one paragraph early on in the key takeaways, he got a crash course in the executive branch. Ensconced at Mr. Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in Florida after the election, Mr. Musk immersed himself in the workings of the bureaucracy. Right there, that's the framework that the Times is putting on this. It's Musk versus bad bureaucrats. Educated by seasoned conservative operatives like Stephen Miller and Russell T. Vogt. Seasoned operatives. No, they are the architects of the fascist coup that Musk is now implementing. And that's how the Times is presenting this. They are blind to what is happening.
You have been calling this a coup, have you not?
On CNN, I was delighted that I got the opportunity to say this was a totalitarian fascist coup, right directed at Jennings. That made me happy.
It made me happy to say on CNN about billionaires that we should eat them. I said we should eat the billionaires, and Abby was like, I don't think this guy can come back on. He's not a serious person. I was like, no, I think we should eat him. So what does it mean to be a totalitarian fascist coup?
So I've talked about this on the show before with you, but I keep on coming back to Hannah Arendt and the origins of totalitarianism and the playbook from both Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia. Stalinist Russia is there, and we know everything that Trump is doing falls right into that. And he's not alone. It's Orban and others as well. But destroy the media, destroy the institutions, destroy trust and faith, flood the zone with all kinds of crap, break everything as you go, worship one figure, one person, even if it's a figurehead, which Trump is, and destroy rights at every turn, demonize classes of people to create a cult against them, demonize them as the other, cause disruption not only in your own country, but in the world. And he's doing all this. And the playbook has long been there. Today, Die Zeit in Germany had, that's where it would be because it's German. This is I'm sure you knew this. I'm sure it's in your calendar. This is the 100th Todestag, Death Day, 100th anniversary of the death of Friedrich Ebert.
Yeah, why do you think I'm dressed like this?
I always wear black for Ebert, yeah. He was the first president of Weimar Germany. And no, it wasn't Die Zeit. It's the Süddeutsche. I always love saying that. Süddeutsche Zeitung.
Different outlet, but we sounds the same to me.
Said, my bad translation here, even the best constitution can exist only if citizens support it and bring it to life. And they had another headline besides that saying, when 2025 feels like 1925, that is to say, just before 1933 and the takeover of Hitler in Germany. The Germans are recognizing the parallels here. The Germans, I think, are doing, I emailed a friend of mine who is the editor of Zeit Online and said, with all honesty, that Zeit Online and the Süddeutsche and sometimes Der Spiegel are doing a better job of covering what's happening in America than American press are. And I begged him to get more translated so that we can share that with America and show what coverage really looks like.
That's very astute point. And I think that the value of watching and reading European media right now, well, what is the value of it? Because I played a clip on the show today with this, I can't even tell the difference between Irish and British. I think he might have been Irish, but he's
You're going to get in trouble, man.
He was a British academic, whatever, and he was really ringing the bell and warning. And I just, the way that he was talking, I thought was serious and important. So what's the value, do you think, of reading European media, opinion pieces, et cetera, right now as they reference what the hell's happening in our stupid country?
I think there's so much value. One is distance, gives them perspective. Two is history, gives them perspective, for God's sakes. That's where fascism last flourished. And their perspective about what's happening to them matters because they're going to have to pick up the defense of Ukraine and democracy and the West. And finally, the impact on them and their lives, these stupid ass tariffs and all of that. No, I said finally, I lied. There's one more. When reading European media, you can really see how the world now, and Canada too, the world now realizes that they cannot trust America. And that is not going to be repaired, even if we get rid of Trump, even if we win in the midterms. Who the hell should trust us? We the country, voted Trump in twice. We are not to be trusted. We are, you think that the Great Britain ain't so great anymore? We have shrunk further. And it's awful. I'm rooting for Canada at every turn. Yeah, don't buy our stuff. In America, what do we call a barrel maker? I forget there's a word for that. For bourbon, they're getting laid off because the Canadians ain't buying our bourbon and there's not much of a market anymore. Yeah, I saw a story about that. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I want to ask you about the announcement from Jeff Bezos, the billionaire owner of the Washington Post, who when he bought it said he would not do anything to influence its coverage, its balance, whatever. Of course, he has done a lot, but the latest move was announcing that the opinion pieces are basically going to now reference and be celebrating or focused on, I forget which words, free markets and personal liberties and free markets. So your interpretation of what that means and why, and also just the importance of the editor-in-chief who had already embarrassed himself by staying on through the other embarrassing announcements that the billionaire owner had influenced him to make. But he was given a choice to go or not. His name is Shipley. Apparently, he's shipped out. He's out. What is the Washington Post announcement? What does it mean? Because I want to just say, it feels like their main reporting, their objective reporting, will still be worthy of some value for us. There will still be good journalism in the Washington Post A section.
All right, a few things. The caveat that one need make here, that everyone makes, is he owns it. And the editorial page, per se, is his. It's his bully pulpit. And that's the privilege that publishers have. This is your show, and you can say what you want. It's his newspaper. He can say what he wants on the editorial page. However, that doesn't necessarily mean the op-ed page, because the op-ed page was created in the, I think, 50s. It started in the New York Times as a way to bring in opposite editorial. Opposing views, other views, diversity and plurality of views. That's the whole point of having it. So for Bezos to say, nope, it's all going to be my view, is a violation of that principle and of that service. And Shipley did try to argue with him and say, no, we want some variety. And Bezos had said to him, it's either hell yes or no. And it was no. So the next issue here is simply that his instructions are vacuous to the point of banality. Who's not for personal liberty? Who's not for free markets? We're in a capitalist country. I want a well-regulated but free market, yes. Personal liberties, absolutely, more than the Republicans would have us have. So it's code words. It's like fair and balanced. It's complete, utter bullshit. It's newspeak. It's meaningless in and of itself. It was a signal to Trump and company to say, I will toe the line. I will not put up opposing views to you. But he can't say it that way, so he comes up with this anodyne, meaningless language, and he thinks we're all that stupid. And it's the person I feel sorry for most right now is, and ever since the lack of an endorsement of Kamala Harris, is Marty Baron. Because the former editor of The Post, who I respect immensely, don't always agree with him, but respect him immensely, he wrote his memoirs lauding Bezos as the ideal steward who never interfered, who was wonderful. And now Marty has to be out there on a tour. He was just in The Guardian. He was on MSNBC a couple times. He's got to be out there saying, I was wrong about Bezos.
Wow.
He's a jerk.
I haven't seen that, but that's important that he's doing it at least.
Yeah.
Let me ask you then, what about the main section of the paper? You didn't say. What do we do with them? Do we not rely on their
They've lost a lot. They've lost a lot of talent, and for good reason. The paper is still under the thumb of Will Lewis, Sir Will to you, who is Murdoch trained, Matt Murray, who is Murdoch trained. And so by bringing them in, Bezos made it clear. And now the other funny thing about Bezos' announcement is that he sees an opening, an opportunity. No, it's the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which is odious, and he wants to be like them. So the paper itself is not in good hands. I asked a former top editor, not Marty, I won't name, a year ago exactly. And I said, this is before all the worst of this occurred and before Will Lewis even came in. And I said, can the paper be saved? And he said, no. So much has gone on there, so much damage, so many scars. They've lost so much talent. There is some still good journalism there, yes, and I note it when I see it, but there's also a lot of crappy journalism there. And if you want to see what I think is crappy, just go to Blue Sky or the other place and look at the Broken Post or Broken Times.
Good job documenting.
And I label them because I'm going to put them together as a compilation. So I'll just go to the latest couple. Today they had a whole big thing. Trump's executive order signings seem to be carefully choreographed. Seem to be. Subhead. There may be a keen strategy, maybe, in President Donald Trump's approach, but there's also an indisputable element of showmanship on display. Oh, fuck me. They're being played, and they're willfully being played, which some would say means you're not being played, you're just playing along. Right. But that breathless credulity. This was a horrible headline yesterday. War-weary Ukrainian Americans dare to hope as Trump pivots to Russia. What the fuck? No. Trump has surrendered to Putin, and he's betrayed the Ukrainians. And in the story itself, they talk about the incredible betrayal, but the headline makes this a framework of hope. And then finally, some have praised this story, a young woman who worked for the U.S. Forest Service, I believe, who voted for Trump. And now, this is now a genre of stories. The oops, I didn't know what was going to happen versions of stories.
Right.
She wants to get pregnant. She voted for Trump because he said he was going to make IVF free, which is stupid enough to believe him, even after having seen what he did 8 years ago. And now the Post expects us to give her empathy. And this gets me in trouble because how are we ever going to vote for them if you're going to make fun of them, if you're going to criticize them? There has to be some accountability for having given us Trump. And so those who voted for him and those who did not vote for Kamala Harris and stayed home because of their single issues, I'm still pissed at you.
I have more compassion.
Yeah, because you're a nicer guy.
I don't know. I think it's more pragmatic because for whatever reason you change your mind, just come on and join us. Just please join us.
Those who say I made a mistake, I will, after a first side eye, will accept them. Those who still hold to him, no. And those who want to scream at me for being on CNN, no. Those who say that we should listen to these jerks, we should listen to these assholes. So may I read a disgusting email I got today?
Oh, please. Yes.
After the CNN appearance. You ignorant cunt motherfucker. If I embarrassed myself as bad as you did, I'd fucking kill myself. Scott Jennings bent you over and fucked you silly and then shot his load like a fire hose right in your dumb fuck face. But I'm supposed to listen to him and empathize with him and understand him and bring him in. No, he's a lost cause forever, the rest of his life until he goes to hell. So yes, I have some empathy, and yes, I have a pragmatic view to bring people along, but some people will never be brought along, and they're the ones who are destroying us.
I agree mostly with that. I amend my answer. I thought you were talking about if someone changes their mind. I'm not talking about those other buckets of people who are either still on the fever train or the guy who emailed you who may or may not have been me. But I just have to also ask you about that email and the hate that you get. A huge percentage of the comments I would get and the emails I got were similar to yours. And in the end, the guy said to you just now, blow his load, his fire hose all over you or something, which is homoerotic. Yeah. And so many of the comments were you're gay or you suck cock or some vulgar gay stuff. And I'm always just fascinated by the consistency of that. Yeah. Of course, the attack on women is different, but the attack on men, perceived straight men especially, is that you're gay. And I got one of those guys who threatened me on Twitter on the phone. I got him
because you do that because you're a bigger man than I am.
And I told him I was gay. And he goes, wait, you are? And then he felt bad and he started backpedaling. And then he goes, are you really gay? I go, no, I just want to see what you'd say if I said it to your face. Why would I be less than? How do you think I'm less than? So I just always think it's worth highlighting the fact that all of their criticism comes from this very homoerotic place. I would never insult somebody. I insult people all the time. I never say something gay. It's just, it's not funny to me.
No, but let me stay on this for a minute because I think we first met in a green room, but when I first saw you on the late lamented morning show on MSNBC on weekends a long time ago, you had that week of the great soliloquy about masculinity. And I forget what the exact trigger for that was at the time, but it was a brilliant moment and it got spread around and I respected you immensely for it. And we have a lot of talk these days about toxic masculinity. And you like Scott Galloway, but I don't, because he wants to go on about how young men are all messed up. A friend of mine, a former colleague of mine, lectured me the other day and said, no, stop with the toxic masculinity, because that's almost an excuse. It's almost saying that if you're a male, you're going to be screwed up. Right. That there are good men, and it's not an appropriate analysis. And I thought it was a good point. But yet we are surrounded by lots of toxic men. Where do you hold the testosterone scale here in the causality of all this?
Oh, I think Richard Reeves' book. Are you familiar with his book? Galloway loves him, likes him too.
That's all I need to know not to want to read it.
Fair enough. But I would love for you to read that. I would love to hear your point of view on it and where you might see disagreement. But listen, I think the conversation about boys and men just like the conversation about race, words get, especially now, and this far more than I do, they get so destroyed. Words get destroyed. So woke we can't use it anymore. And I don't think we should use toxic in reference to men or masculinity. I don't think even narcissist and gaslighting, all those words, they just mean they're so loaded. And what I'd rather get to is the root. And if we could talk about the same thing without the words, and then to speak of the root, I do think there's a lot of conversation that we need to have about men and their roles in society at any age, certainly my generation, middle age, but young men too, and try to understand what is happening. And I think the easiest, simplest way to say it is there's a lot of lonely people. And when you're lonely and you're younger, you get lonely than it is when you're older. It's still tough for a lot. So
this goes back to Hannah Arendt, where she argues that the beginning of totalitarianism is to alienate people from their communities and society. And it is in that profound loneliness that they have this desire to join something, and that's what makes them vulnerable to joining the likes of the Trump mob.
All those documentaries, there's a lot of good documentaries in the last 15 years. Since 9/11, I would say specifically on white supremacist extremism and how they get radicalized. I ate all those up. I interviewed all those authors and documentarians. And that's before the internet, that's loneliness. They prey upon vulnerable men who just want a group. And you know what? Unfortunately, they met the white supremacists before they met the Dungeons and Dragons guys or the Marvel Cinema Universe guys or even the MMA guys, although there's a lot of overlap there, right? So I think it's about feeling like you're part of a group. If you're not on a sports team, or if you're not, and now that's all done on the internet, and it's very easy to fall down into the dark web, especially for men. You see this guy Andrew Tate coming back. Identify with a lot of these types of guys. The whole incel thing is a real thing, and we need to, I think, try to understand it as much as we can, because boys matter, and their suffering matters, and their loneliness matters. And I think we need to address it.
Yes, but I think that anger is being used as a weapon for its own sake so much that it's hard to cut through and to get to what that basis really is. I'm sorry, I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to quote Hannah Arendt again. She says that in these times of totalitarianism, people grab onto abstract notions. Right? And I would say in this country, it's things like trans. Who every single day really cares about trans kids in bathrooms? They don't. But it's a signal of belonging to the Trump cult to have that hate. And so the hate becomes a signal. The hate becomes a MacGuffin. It's not necessarily an actual belief. It's thrown out there as a loyalty test. So when media come along and say, gee, they don't like trans, and the Democrats are so stupid to have gone along and defended trans people, that's where you lost the election. That's idiotic and offensive because we're not getting to the real essence of people's daily lives about their kids and their jobs and their mortgages and their futures and talking about their real life. Instead, we're accepting the cant that is given them by the cult, and you never get to that reality then. Well, so when we have young men who are so angry, if you even try to ask them, what are they so angry about? I think it's hard to cut through to that core that you're looking for.
I'll straight ask them. And I want to do that project. I do on this show. So if anybody listening has a Gen Z son, and a few of you have reached out, that's something I'm making an effort to do to find that out. But what we have to do is just not cede the ground to outlets and podcasts and shows that creates the blame for a fertile ground for that blame, someone to blame, or we create a more thoughtful conversation as you have always done, as I am always trying to do, which is nuance around the root of the problems. And why can't we just have all the blame and the rhetoric and the language and the anger that you're mentioning directed at billionaires, class war? Well, how do we get that going? Because they want to blame poor people. They want to blame DEI. They want to blame things that aren't the causes to real problems. Those planes did crash. But it wasn't because of the reasons they say. The military might have problems and weaknesses, but it's not because of the female who fucking commanded a battleship carrier group for 30 years, and Trump just fired her as Secretary of the Navy. So I think we just have to give them and compete with them.
But the problem, Pete, so if you sit them down on the other side of this wonderful application and you ask, why are you angry? How you're going to get the cant back. You're going to get the standard lines back. You're going to get what's fed to them. What I don't know how to do is to have maybe you don't start with the anger. Maybe you start with their lives and you understand, you ask them about their lives. And
that's absolutely right. I have the key question to ask your internet troll or your son or your friend, a young man you don't know. It's exactly what you just said, starting with their lives, not starting with the anger. Here's the question. And this is where it performs, and it'll affect you right now, I think. Especially when you're talking to a young man, under 30, under 25, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you?
What do they say?
They tell you the worst thing that's ever happened, and it's very often where to start with them. Or where to understand where their anger, their isolation, their loneliness comes from. And the best one, I've done it a few times, only had a few opportunities, was this young man who was just saying horrible things to me on Twitter. I DM'd him. I got him on the phone. I got him talking. I humanized myself to him, asked him the question, what's the worst thing that's happened to you? And he goes, right now my mom is dying of cancer and I take care of her and I'm 21 and we're alone. And I became like a person to him that mattered. I heard his guttural cry. Like I heard him and I acknowledged his suffering and his pain. And then we went from there, and you can talk about anything from there. You can talk about anything there because he's totally vulnerable. And if you can get someone to tell you the worst thing that's ever happened to them, it really opens a lot of doors. It's a very weird and sensitive question to ask. I wouldn't do it on a first date, but maybe.
Do you have the opportunity to also ask them what their hopes and dreams are, or do they have none anymore?
I never thought of that. That's, I think, a great question.
Yeah.
Because then they might tell you what's in the way in their mind. Resources, opportunity, black guy got the job over me.
What I don't know is, even if you start to get to that essence, I think you're right, is that one important thing here, and this is what I devote some of my efforts. I started a program with my colleague Carrie Brown in engagement journalism. It's all about listening. It's all about putting down the notebook and putting down the camera and understanding people first. And what I struggle with is how to create a journalism of belonging, how to help people feel heard, truly heard, not being, pardon me, a platform for the propaganda, for the signals, for the standard lines, but that the question you ask is the right question. And so at that moment, that kid felt heard. And that's truly heard, not falsely. And I don't know how to get there at a larger scale.
I have another answer. And I think this is the beginning of it. You've been to my Hangouts. Mm-hmm. That's a large-scale listening session for me to know where to go, what to cover, what they're concerned with, and to learn things I'm not paying any attention to. And it's private, so they know they're not on the record.
God bless.
And so they can be honest, and they can also be anonymous often with their camera off. So I feel like it gives a journalistic quality to it because you're anonymous, your camera's off, and this isn't being aired. So it's a very kind of focus groupy thing. It's not scientific, but at least it gives me a place to hear them, and it gives them a place to scream and shout about whatever they want. And last night it was mostly about the details or lack of details around the death of Gene Hackman.
Because it's such a weird story. Yeah, I speculated the other day that I think that what we're going to find is chat LLMs, ChatGPT and company, will become a repository for people's intimate thoughts.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because they can do it anonymously. They can speak anonymously. Right. When I was doing my research for my book, The Gutenberg Parenthesis, out in paperback now, one thing that fascinated me was the advent of silent reading. That when few could read, and there were few books were read from a podium, and silent reading was an oddity. But what silent reading led to was new heresies and new sins like pornography. Because if you were dictating to a scribe, you weren't going to go into your pornographic dreams. You weren't going to talk about how you weren't sure about God because you're going to get in trouble. But if you could read it on your own and write it on your own, that silence, that anonymity, created an opportunity for an honesty with yourself.
That's exactly what's going to happen. Of course it is. We've seen those kind of endeavors and books being written where you can anonymously your dreams, your fears, and all of that.
Right. And people ask Google things they don't want to ask the rest of the world. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Don't want to tell the rest of the world. Before I let you go, I just have to ask you about this whole White House Correspondents Association announcement, or the announcement from the White House that the White House Correspondents Association will no longer be in control of the press pool covering the President of the United States. So first time this has ever happened, decades long this has been going on, these tradition. And the Washington Post, rather New York Times, says the White House announced on Tuesday that it was seizing control of the press pool covering Trump, coming the first administration in decades to insist that it will decide which news organizations, which reporters are allowed to be close enough to question the president in places like the Oval Office and Air Force One, which means he's going to pick reporters who are going to be like, sir, just how big is your dick?
Which we've been seeing, and now that they opened up the press room for the press conferences, you see those sycophantic kind of moments. Yeah. So it started with, I think the first shot fired was that a lot of major press outlets lost their desks at the Pentagon. Then they lost space in the White House. Then the AP, because it wouldn't say Gulf of America, was kicked out of the Oval Office in certain events. And now they're doing the pool. And next they're going to, God knows what they'll do next. I'm, as is often the case these days, terribly disappointed in my field because every decent outlet should have walked the hell out of the press room.
You think so?
Yes, because it's a worthless event. It's on video anyway. They don't learn anything. This is the perils of access journalism.
You would be seating the ground to cameras and microphones that would be able to create whatever narrative they want.
You're already there. We are there. That's exactly where we are. I did an interview with a German radio station 2 weeks ago, and he asked a good question, as you do often, where he said, does Trump need the media anymore? He did the first time around, but he has his own social outlet. Musk's is his own social outlet. He has Fox. He has all these crazy places. He used to want the attention. Does he need them in any way anymore? And I think the answer to that is no. He needs them only as a foil. And so by sitting there, you are his foil. And by not protesting and not standing up together, you're not standing up for us. So he devalues media with everything he does. Why don't we devalue his show? Why don't we stop covering it as if it's important all the time when it isn't? Yeah. We're going to know what's going on. There's nothing we're not going to know if we just leave, but leave and do some real reporting.
Did you see when he started handing out the Trump was always right hats or something? Trump was right about everything hats. And he tossed them. He was behind the desk in the Oval Office, and he started tossing them to reporters. And the Newsmax guy was like jumping for it like it was a free T-shirt at a Yankees game. And other reporters like, ew, don't let it touch me, because they don't think that's equal, much less appropriate or ethical. And then RFK was standing behind him going, my father was once in this room with a different man, and I'm behind this fucking clown. But what does it mean that the White House is chipping away at the ability of major news organizations that have historically been far more objective from covering it? What does that mean for the public interest?
We're seeing what it means. It was seen that our major outlets are missing the biggest story of their careers and the century right under their noses. They're not covering the totalitarian fascist coup as what it is. They're still seeking access. They're still going through all kinds of ridiculous both sidesing. What was it today? I'm going to give you another headline here, and then you can get rid of me. But first, I got to find it. The Times today had a story about freedom of speech. And so in an editorial decrying the Trumpist attacks on speech, the Broken Times, as I call it, can't resist its insidious both sidesing, because they talk about the censorial strains of the left. No, criticizing a word or a word choice is not censorship. Banning books and banning DEI, that's censorial fascism. So in the story, they said that the current administration may argue that these steps are simply payback for an American political left that can be rightly criticized, says the New York Times, making a judgment, for policing speech in recent years, from trying to shut out or shout down conservative speakers to trying to enforce adherence to its own list of acceptable words and phrases like pregnant people and unhoused and incarcerated individuals and Latinx. That's the way the Times is looking at this. That's the way they both sides of this. That's the way they don't see the asymmetry of this. And that's the way that they end up complying with it. And that's dangerous. So the White House is indeed tearing down the media, but the media are tearing down themselves. And that's my business. That's what I've devoted 50 years of my life to, because I'm an old fart. And that's how long I've been working in this field. Started very young. And it's a profound disappointment to me to see my own field fail at this moment.
Well, you didn't fail. And I appreciate
I've had my failures.
You've been a huge failure, actually. I'm disappointed. Who else would be disappointed in you? Everybody you've ever cared about. We're all disappointed in you, Jarvis. You've been consistent throughout your career, and you've been really an amazing friend and outlet and source through all of the madness that we've been living through for a long time to me and this audience. So we're very grateful to you. My mom was going through her favorite guests on the show, and she named 3 names, and I won't say the other 2, but yours was one of them. She's like,
"Oh, I'm touched, Mom. Thank you."
Say hi, Mary Dominic, public school teacher for over 20 years.
God bless God's work, Mary, and thank you. I needed that today. Thank you.
All right, I'll let you go. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for joining me, Mike.
Love you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff Jarvis, and thank you for listening to today's episode of Stand Up. I'm so happy to be with you here as I am every day. Go buy John Carroll's new album that's playing right now. This track is on it. John Carroll, 2 R's, 2 L's. He is, of course, a Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter and composer, and we love him. Go buy that album right now. I'll see you tonight at 8 if you want to join us for the Hangout. And that's it. That's all I've got for you. Go write a review of this show on Spotify and iTunes or Apple Podcasts if you haven't already. And I will talk to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up every weekday and sometimes on the weekend. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand.